Our next discussion is all about the future of print media and whether it looks bleak or not. Some newspapers are closing shop, others are reducing their circulation, and they're opting in favor of digital sites. Media24 announcing the closure of some of its print newspapers, including the Daily Sun and City Press this past week. Earlier this year, announcing the closure of Laduma and Beeld. So these platforms are now moving to digital. Let's talk about the impact, the importance of adaptability, and what some of the global trends are. And Professor of Journalism at the University of Wits, Anton Harber, joins me now. Anton, it's always a pleasure to have you, and thanks for giving us your time today. People were looking at, their last sort of hard copy of the City Press yesterday. And when in News24 announcing all of this, essentially basically saying that, this is the time for them to move to a viable and sustainable model for independent digital journalism. I'd just like your thoughts overall at the outset about this particular development in South African media.
Look, you have to, in many ways it's inevitable since the rise of the internet that old-style traditional news operations like newspapers would be replaced by digital options which are cheaper and more efficient in many ways. But the sadness, of course, is that many young people will not realize the special value newspapers often play in people's lives and people's communities, in our politics, in our society. And we're going through one of the biggest transitions in news and journalism and communication since the invention of the printing press. And in many ways, we headed into the unknown, because while we know a bit about the internet and social media and how it works, it's still evolving, it's still taking shape. And what it'll do to our flow of news, the authenticity of our news, the trustworthiness of our news, all of that we still uncertain of.
And we'll come and talk a little bit more about the impact, especially around the issue of accessibility. In other words, who will be able to access, digital reporting, whether there'll be these paywalls and so on, and how that affects also the growth and the muscularization of democracy. But I'm just thinking about, moments and major companies that changed the industries in which they played. You think about Netflix killing the video store, or you think about Domino's Pizza, one of the most prolific pizza companies in the world, more a technology company than an actual pizza company. So people are rethinking the way that business is done and the way that business is either, the digitalization or the digitalization, I should say, or digital transformation of so many sectors in society today. So I'd love your commentary just on that perhaps it is time for a paradigm shift.
No, there's no question we're going through the end of the print era as we know it. It's a massive paradigm shift. All our communication, all our business, all our operations are moving digital, and that changes them fundamentally. It changes the way we gather news, the way we communicate with each other, the way we do business. The change is enormous, and we're only beginning to understand the impact it has on us and our society. And as I say, there's some concern about what we lose when we lose traditional newspapers. We will still have newspapers online, but I think those are different products that take a different shape and play a different role.
Well, let's go into that what we lose piece. Anton, you sort of hinted at it in the beginning. You've mentioned it now. Spell it out for us.
Newspapers sometimes, or even quite often, we're very much part of defining a community of people who had shared an identity, a politics, social connections. And the newspaper played a leading role in forming and shaping that community. I have no doubt. I mean, some of the newspapers we've seen close have very mixed histories. One has got to be frank about that. Some of the Afrikaans papers, for example, were absolute voices of apartheid that were key in maintaining the apartheid system for many years, and then later helpful in ending that system. So it's a mixed thing, but there's no question, for example, that these papers, very many of them played a critical role in defining, shaping, forming a community and the community. They were centerpieces of communities and the communication within that community. And while we have different forms of social communication on the internet, it's not quite the same.
Let's talk about accessibility. The argument is, you'd had to pay for your hard copy anyway, so you're going to have to pay for your digital copy regardless. What are some of the other complexities or things we're not thinking about when we think that now really important investigative journalism pieces, or just shining, a light on society, showing us who we are at a particular time, will be in a specific space that might not be accessible to everyone? And also, I mean, you think about, sorry, just to add, Anton, once I've finished with my newspaper, I can give it to somebody else to read who hasn't paid for it, and they can give it to somebody else. And of course, there are other 100 uses, but we're not talking about that now. So, the accessibility question is different when it lives in a digital space.
Absolutely. The great hope when the internet emerged in the in the last years of the last century, was that it would open up communication. Everyone would have access. It would make communication cheap and easy and fast, and open it up enormously and democratize it. But we've learned that that's not the case, and it's not the case largely because we are struggling to find ways to pay for journalism, for newspapers, for information collection and curation and editing on the internet. So what's happening is that we're getting fewer voices, less journalism, smaller newsrooms, because we haven't found, apart from a few global sites, we've hardly found a way in which to fund journalism in the new economy, in the new digital economy. The core of it is that people are going to have to move to online subscriptions if they want edited, curated, selected, quality journalism products that they can trust. But of course, not everyone can afford that. We do know that there's an enormous amount of news and information available on social media that is free or near free, but it's much less trustworthy. It's unselected, it's unprocessed, it's unverified. And so the real danger is that it's opened the door to masses of often dangerous disinformation. So it's healthy in that the internet has opened things up and democratized communication to some extent, but it's unhealthy in that it's opened it up to a lot of untrustworthy, unverified, poor information that we are seeing doing damage to our society in many different ways.
Is this marking the extinction of newspapers in South Africa in print form, Anton?
Yes, you are going to see most newspapers in this country and around the world be replaced by digital products. There will be some print products. Print will not disappear, but it'll only be for specific kinds of magazines or books that work particularly well in print. But certainly most newspapers will become digital products, and those are different products that fit into society in a different way. And as I say, we face real challenges in funding journalism and the kind of investigative journalism you referred to, because that's difficult and expensive. And there's less of it. A lot of it came from newspapers. So the death of newspapers often means the diminishing of investigative accountability journalism that's so important to our democracy.